The era of the independent Greek city-states is ended, and the next era begun by this gentleman over here, Alexander the Great. He creates the next stage, which we call the Hellenistic era, which means to imitate Greeks. It just means that Greek language, Greek culture spreads throughout Southwest Asia and even further than that, and that sort of helpfully marks for us the next stage in history. Just to explain what you're looking at here, this is a very famous depiction of Alexander defeating the Persians. This is Alexander over here on his horse, and this is the Persian emperor. These are all the Persians, and Alexander is beating them. Alexander comes from this part of Greece up here. It's called Macedonia. Now you'll remember that Sparta and Athens had been fighting in the Peloponnesian War for a really, really long time. So even though Sparta wins, this war between these two guys right here, between Sparta and Athens, greatly weakens both of them. Athens is really weak after the war, and even Sparta, even though they win, they're all bruised and battered and beat up. And so what happens is it's actually Alexander's dad, Philip, who's king of Macedon up here in the north. They take advantage of the situation. Sparta and Athens were the great powers, but now they're really weak because they beat each other up. And Philip invades from Macedon. He comes in, swoops in on the two beaten and battered cities, and he conquers Greece. So Philip, that is Alexander's dad, puts an end to the era of the independent Greek city-states. He conquers all of Greece, and he wanted to go on. He wanted to do what his son is eventually going to do and conquer more, but Philip dies. So Philip dies, and his son, Alexander, steps up to become, the new sort of king of this area, because that's what the Macedonians do. Philip swoops in, conquers all here. Then Alexander's like, all right, it's my turn, because Philip is dead. I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to conquer some more. And he creates the largest empire the world had yet seen. So he beats the record of the Persian Empire. He's going to conquer all of this in the purple and the green. By the way, Alexander becomes king when he is 20 years old. So he's 20 years old, becomes king of just Greece, and he says, you know what, it was always my father's dream to conquer the Persian Empire. It's my dream to conquer the Persian Empire. I want to conquer the world. I want to conquer everybody. And he takes off with his army and goes forward. Remember, Persia owns all of that. Alexander goes forward, and he follows this red line here, wins battle after battle. By all accounts, this incredibly brilliant guy, brilliant with military tactics, brilliant with politics. He was probably also a little bit crazy. Like, he sort of thought he was a god. So he was just a little wacky, but he was also just very, very smart. He comes forward here, conquers this area of Persia here, goes down, conquers Egypt, and then just follows this whole red line right here. Conquers. All those little red cities are cities that he began, cities that he started. You'll notice his favorite name for cities. He likes to name them after himself. So Alexandria. He makes a lot of Alexandrias. So brilliant, fair to say, also sort of egotistical. Again, he is doing this, conquering the Persian Empire, creating the largest empire the world had yet seen when he's in his 20s, right? It's 13 years of campaigning that begins when he's 20 years old. He gets all the way to here, to the edge of India, and he wants to keep going. He's like, hey, let's cross these mountains and conquer India. I'd like to make my empire even bigger. But his troops refused to keep going. I mean, his troops loved him, but they said, listen, we've been at this for many years now. We would like to go home. So he relents, and he's like, all right, fine, but we'll conquer on the way back. And then he goes and sort of conquers some more. But Alexander himself never makes it back home. He dies on the way back at the young age of 33, having, again, conquered this gigantic Persian Empire and creating this gigantic thing. But he dies on the way back home, never makes it back to Greece. Alexander had some enlightened views for a leader of his time. He considered non-Greeks to be the equals of Greeks. So he didn't discriminate against the people he conquered. Remember, he himself is Greek, but he conquers Egypt, he conquers the Persian Empire, which is modern-day Iraq, modern-day Iran, he gets all the way to Central Asia. And as far as he's concerned, all the people in his empire are equal, and he wants to bring the empire together. He wants to create something that's sort of like the United States of America today, right? In that, you wouldn't think twice about moving to California or moving to Ohio because, hey, we're all one country, right? He wants his empire to be like that. So to that end, he marries a Persian princess. He wanted his soldiers to marry Asian wives because he wanted, again, to sort of create this one nation kind of thing. Like, he was taking the Persian Empire, which was this mix of peoples, and Greece, and he wanted to make it all one thing. And he figured that creating families where you had people from different areas would be a great way to do that. Some of his soldiers resisted that, others were fine with it. But again, he was very enlightened, and he wanted everyone to be one big happy family with him as the boss. That was his plan, but again, he does not make it back home. He dies at the very young age of 33, having spent his whole time as king campaigning, his whole time as king conquering places out in the field. He hasn't spent really any time back in Greece just being a sort of a king on a throne. He has no children when he dies. So his empire just right away is split apart, as we've seen before. His empire is split apart right away by his generals. They divide it up, and it just sort of fractures immediately, and then over time fractures further, and eventually Rome is just going to come and take over all these places. The rulers that come after Alexander are not as enlightened as him. They only include Greeks in their ruling class. So his vision of creating this one big nation never comes to pass. Would it have if he had lived? Who knows, but he didn't. And the one important cultural legacy of this is the fact that even though these are conquered later, they are ruled over by these various empires, by these rulers for a while. And the legacy of that is that since these people only included the Greeks in their ruling classes, Greek is considered the sort of snobby elite. Greek becomes the language that all the smart rich people know how to speak in many of these areas for a long time afterwards. Greek remains this again language of the elites, language of the snobs in all these places for a long time after Alexander is gone. Hellenistic culture is just a touch different than the classical Greece culture we described before with like Socrates and all those guys, all about rationality. Hellenistic culture is a lot more about emotions. And again, one of the other legacies of Alexander is he founded many cities, including Alexandria in Egypt, which of course he named after himself, as he named many cities after himself. This is a picture of ancient Alexandria in Egypt up here. What was and still is an incredibly important city in Egypt that, again, was created by him. And at least in those cities, his vision of like diversity and learning and all this stuff, at least in those cities, that did remain for quite a while. So while Alexander's empire, in historical terms, really doesn't last for very long, the impact he had in placing Greek culture, Greek language all over the place, and in elevating it, and so that Greek was considered this really learned and important thing to know, that persisted for a very long time.